Hi, folks. Good morning and welcome to the 11th edition of the SRI seminar series. I hope you're having a wonderful time. We're really happy to have you join, given that there are 35 other events that are happening right now. Most of you already know about the Risk and Resilience Tech Hub, but I did want to provide a very quick introduction. The Risk and Resilience Tech Hub is a public-private partnership working across the four-county area, and its major objective is to commercialize solutions for our changing relationship to water and extreme weather. Ultimately, this will result in workforce development, in economic development, and regional innovation, which will be reflected as good jobs, thriving startups, resilient economy, national security enhancements, and in resilient infrastructure. The broad scope under which the Tech Hub operates is very broad. It goes into the water, out of the water. We're looking at coastal defense, energy efficient buildings, clean cement. The total addressable markets of each of these are given, and these are several billion-dollar potential markets. So there's a lot to be done, and if you're interested, we can talk later about why Miami is the place for doing something like this. What we've done as part of this tech hub, and there's a lot of different things that we are doing, but one thing is the Sustainable and Resilient Infrastructure Seminar Series. And this is not an education play. Rather, it is something very practical. The idea is that we educate, well, I said it's not an education play, it's just a different kind of education play. We educate and bring awareness to high TRL technologies to accelerate their adoption. We disseminate adoption on a number of different technologies to increase the TRL. And most critically, we establish connections between all of our different stakeholders. And a primary objective is to reduce barriers to commercialization, is to enhance adoption, things like that. So I've listed the next three seminars in the text here. Today's talk is going to be by Emily, who is kind of with FIU, but also kind of with Gulliver. She's going to introduce herself, so I'm not going to do that. But the talk is titled Resilient Infrastructure Innovation, Technology Maturation, Testing, and Policy Pathways. All of you know Emily. I don't think she needs an introduction. We certainly would not have the Tech Hub project if not for her. So I let her talk, but before that, just one thing, if you don't mind, please go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat. Say a couple of nice things about yourself or bad things about yourself. It's up to you. And put in a link to your LinkedIn, or if you have any specific ask, if there is something that you want to get out of this, please put that in the chat as well. With that, I stop and over to Emily. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Good morning, everybody. Let me share my screen. And okay, so yeah, everyone seeing me okay, or the screen? I can't see you all at all,
Yes,
so
it's perfect.
terrific. Yeah, I see nothing. Um, so I am Emily Gresham Furton. I am the program director for the Risk and Resilience Tech Hub's infrastructure project. So I'm the special advisor to FIU. I was the AVP for Innovation and Economic Development at FIU for 10 years, and recently moved to Gulliver to head their campaign, but still remain fully engaged in the Tech Hub. So today's talk is a little bit about, what is the infrastructure project? The Risk and Resilience Tech Hub, as Prannoy mentioned, has three technology verticals, and we're one of those technology verticals. And within this vertical, we have our three core technologies that we're bringing to market. We also have an infrastructure innovation center. So I want to talk to you guys about those services. And we have a policy innovation working group, or we would like to launch one. I'm going to spend a lot of times a little bit dense, so I apologize for that up front, but hopefully we can stay connected after this. So the three key activities, as I already mentioned, so we have our partners, FIU, Titan America, the University of Miami, and Carbon Limit. And we have three primary activities. They are technology management and maturation of those three core technologies that I talked to you about, or that I referenced, and the Innovation Center and policy, right? So for the technology management and maturation activity, there are three primary ones. So Capturecrete is a cement sort of alternative. And so it leads to about 12% reduction in cement. It enhances its strength and reducing the clinker content. So this is an additive that we add to the concrete mixture. Um, there's ternary cement at Titan America. And, we do, these are next generation cement materials. They are reducing emissions, but for us, it's really about the resilience, right? The fact that it improves the durability of these concrete. And then we have sprayable UHPC, which we all know is not in it of itself an innovation. At FIU, it is more about its proprietary application of it. So it is more durable, resilient to seawater corrosion, other damage. And it actually, the way that Dr. Aziz Amini is working on it, it actually allows for a building of smaller and lightweight structures, so which leads to energy savings. And it's a longer, much longer life cycle. So we are working to mature these technologies. Now they are in the market. It's ready to go. What we want to do, as you kind of all know, introducing new materials into construction is a bear. Um, Doing it in Miami-Dade is like a grizzly bear, right? So for us, we are looking to demonstrate some of these technologies because what that's going to do is allow people to see how it performs in real life in our South Florida crazy weather environment. And it shows that they are viable materials, right? So the ideal project for us is anything 10 to 100 cubic yards with timelines in 9 months. And so what this just means is that we would offset the material cost difference, if there is any, between using regular cement or our cement or concrete. We would cover any re-engineering costs for the designs, and the quality assurance and QC support. We would provide access to industry validated technologies like it is ASTM compliant, and then technical support for implementation, right? So how do we actually get this into the ground, or onto busways or home slabs, right? So a little bit of a smattering of the different types of projects that is available. Vertical surfaces are also ideal. We have potential partners that we've outlined for this. Like these are again ideal partners. So county departments, county, cities, munis, anything that involves infrastructure, capital projects, public works, transportation, utilities, or water systems. But we also can serve residential and commercial projects. So we'd love to hear from you if you have potential projects that could demonstrate these materials in the next 9 months or year or so. So the next thing I want to talk about, and I'm trying to slow down. I'm a New Yorker, so I talk fast. Um, is the Infrastructure Innovation Center. So when we sought to get funding for this project, it's really about how do we scale these types of technologies in our South Florida region to create economic development that is more jobs, right? More resilient companies. So the issue with infrastructure innovation is that you have long, expensive adoption cycles, right? It's really capital intensive. There's a high cost to validate and test. It's not cheap to come to our university labs. Um, the Wall of Wind can charge anywhere up to $30,000 for testing, and that really puts startups at a disadvantage. So we want to address that. There's also limited access to these specialized equipment, not to mention the really complex regulatory procurement barriers that all of you are way more familiar with than I. I don't have to explain that to you, but I will later. The So we call it the conservative infrastructure market, but it is true. Introducing new building materials is not for the faint of heart. It takes decades to bring it to market, and for us, we don't have decades, right? The storms are getting stronger. The water is flooding higher. There's a higher cost to the damage that it causes, and how do we rebuild? And it's not just the infrastructure that you have to rebuild. It is getting back online, securing our supply chain, getting back to work, clearing out roads, all that. So it is a lot more. When we talk resilience, it is a lot more than just, I would say, storm damage, right? It's how do we create a resilient economy here in South Florida? So we are also looking at sort of shortening or enhancing the ability to get promising technologies from lab validation to actual deployment. And so we are supporting companies with validated technologies on pilot projects, assessing their commercial readiness, market adoption, and then for scalable deployment. So these are the types of things that an ideal company would be working on in order to really interface well with us. Um, I'll talk more about the ideal company a little bit later, but just wanted to let you. So what we would offer is testing capabilities, equipment rental, small grants and funding support for startups and small businesses, engineering and technical integration services, warehousing, collaboration and event space, and general startup commercialization support. And I'll go into each one, but this is just an overview. So in terms of testing capabilities, we have three labs and really more because we have Titan America as well, but FIU's Wall of Wind, where you test with hurricane force winds, um, wind driven rain simulation, extreme weather resilience evaluation. At the University of Miami, there is for testing for aging and long term durability. And I feel bad that I'm reading this, but I really feel like they're like I should read it out loud, right? So fatigue and repeated loading, reactivity, material characterization, and advanced testing. Titan, Florida. So there's an R&D lab for material, and this is actually at FIU. It's material testing, scale-up evaluation, cement and concrete technology support. So additional capabilities are listed there. We are launching a website today. We're going live on some new edits that will add all these services. So we'll give you a QR code to get to our website. Um, so so there is a plethora of support capabilities, and it ranges, right? So it depends on what you need and the size and the scope of the project, whether it can be completely free. Like Wall of Wind just completed two testing projects that were completely free because the grant covered it. And then there are some projects that have a bigger scope, so they're what I would call heavily subsidized. So equipment rental. We're talking about short-term rentals. There's this website, unitedrantals.com. So how this would work is Titan America would be the entity that rents the equipment, and then they would then rent it out to partners at no cost, depending on what you guys need. Um, and there's also, so we would also schedule, we would coordinate and schedule across the partners the different type of equipment you may need, because one may be at the University of Miami already. We don't have to get another rental, or one might be at FIU. So we would help coordinate that. Um, and then the small grants for startups. So this is important for me to emphasize. I'm sorry it's not in the actual presentation. So we have roughly $260,000 a year that could go toward what we call small grants. And these are non-dilutive grants to companies to help do anything like additional hires, not necessarily equipment rental, right? Because it's the EDA is really interesting in the way it sets up how we can use the dollars. So I think it's 260,000. I don't think it's over a year. I think it's over 3 years, but we'll confirm that. It'll be all on the website. This is early on. I did want to mention that this innovation center comes online on October 1st of this year. So we're coming to you 6 months before, just so that we can educate the ecosystem on what it is, what do you have access to, and the information is going to get clearer and more plentiful as it gets closer to October. And there will be a process for applying that we will definitely push out to everyone. So I'll talk to you more about that later. So these are tiny grants. They're not a ton of funding, but for those that just need a little bit of extra support to get something off the ground, we think it would be valuable. There's the engineering technical integration services, right? So when you're introducing new materials into a build, it is definitely going to change your plans. And so there we have some engineering contractors that can help support and offset that cost for you all. And so Titan, again, is managing this stuff. And so they will be able to provide support in how do we make these technology innovations that you all are working on deployable, right? There is warehousing collaboration space. So if you came on early, you heard Pranoy and I talk a little bit about the Titan Innovation Hub that they just opened in Wynwood. That is a beautiful state-of-the-art event. I would call it event and meeting space, right? So they have big screens, interactive, that can hold about, I would say, probably comfortably 50 to 60 people for a workshop, and probably over 100 for gatherings. So if there was a time that you wanted to gather and convene, you know, members from our ecosystem to demonstrate your project, or to show your or to perform a workshop, that is an available facility for you to use free of charge. It is offset by this grant. And then there's also warehousing and staging space. So Titan has a warehousing facility up in Broward. Um, and a number of startups in our ecosystem have worked with them on a lease agreement, so that you not only get the space, but they also provide technical assistance in terms of how to, warehouse your materials, how to create the manufacturing sort of capabilities, and what are the best practices, right, in industry. So I think this is a fantastic tool for people out there. And then there's general startup and commercialization support. So this is offered through FIU. and there's a multitude of ways. So education, so this SRI series is part of it. The IBT seminar series out of the Department of Transportation lab at the at FIU. We have monthly seminar series as well. All of this can be found on our website. So all the information is there. We are going to start workforce development workshops. We might pilot something in the next few months, depending on if we can get a good date for most people to attend, and then really roll it out come this fall. But there's also mentorship from infrastructure leaders, right? So we're talking about mentorship from university researchers on your technologies, but also from um, industry partners like Titan that can talk to you about your commercial plans, your growth strategies. On the university side, we are, I would say, really adept at writing and securing state and federal funding. So in terms of SBIRs, TTRs, there's so much room to partner on that. So reaching out to us, we find the right sort of technical lead, and then we put together a team and a project to submit to the various agencies. We also have a broad network. So from strategic partners, there might be other startups in the ecosystem that you should be talking to, or other commercial partners, or investors, or other university labs. There is a vast network of folks that we are in touch with. So if there is a need, we will do our best to find it. We will also interface with the Risk and Resilience Tech Hub, led by the county, which has an even broader network. So I think this is also something that it can be really leveraged. So going to the application and review process, and so we are working toward, I would say, a mid-May launch of applications. It'll take about, I would say, 2 months for us to sort of review them. So what we would do, right, you submit your application, we would review your eligibility, and sort of look at the scope of your project. We do have a small team of partners from university and industry to review the project. We also will have Titan America's investor arm that will be on the team, which I think is terrific because they are potential investors. It would be a nice pathway, at least to get on their radar. And then, we select and onboard the company in late September for an October 1 start, right? And it's not one of those cohort-based things. It really is just means October 1, we will let when your testing would start, or when your equipment rental would happen, and things like that, or your small grants. Um, so our target companies, it is not open to every startup in the ecosystem. It is focused on sort of material suppliers or developers, construction deployment companies, engineering and design services, manufacturing production companies, and then technology systems developers. And it's really in the technologies of, concrete, cement, similar type materials, or materials that replace cement, or augment, I guess. There's the coastal and flood protection we can look at, transportation infrastructure, and then building systems and resilience. So they are broad, but we are looking for companies that have technologies at a readiness of 6 or higher. So this means it's been demonstrated, replicated in the lab, and you need a little bit of validation to get it out and then into demonstration projects in real life. We want to see that there's an ability to deploy in South Florida, because even if you're headquartered elsewhere, for us, it doesn't preclude you from getting services. It just means that we want to be able to see how you intend to grow the South Florida ecosystem, right? And then there is that, and that you have clarity on what is the barrier, like what is the go-to-market strategy, what's the barrier preventing you, whether it be it technical engineering integration, or you can't scale up because we don't have the manufacturing capabilities or know-how, things like that has to be clear. And again, we're developing an application process that will have questions, instructions, a person you can call to ask questions. And that will be available in the next few weeks. And then we'll push it out through all of our channels. So we do plan to start with 15 to 20 companies for support in the upcoming year, and we will do that for the next 3 years. So starting in 2026, and then we'll do it again in 27 and 28, right? So altogether, we're looking at supporting anywhere between 45 to 60 companies over the next few years. So the third key activity that we do is our policy working group. So we created, so it's interesting. The EDA said to us, they had a site visit a couple of days ago, and they said, we're really impressed with the fact that you are addressing policy. And it's not a common thing amongst the tech hub. And for us, because we're in infrastructure materials, because of the complexity of getting those technologies deployed, it is an essential part of what we do. Because the policies, the codes, the procurement systems are definitely outdated. I love you, Miami-Dade County. I love you, Broward County. I love you, all my counties, but it's a little outdated, right? So sometimes they unintentionally they limit and they slow adoption without removing some of these barriers. It is impossible to scale new building materials. And again, these new building materials isn't just about reducing emissions or it's really about enhancing resilience. And you know, we're not using phones that are 20 years old, so using building materials that are 20 years old seems counterintuitive, right? Um, so Titan America and the team led a policy gap analysis, and the QR code is there if you want to download that report. We did it last September. Um, and really it was reviewing the codes and specs across local, state, and the national level. There was an email survey to municipal officials in our region. And then our team conducted some follow-up interviews. So that was the approach that we took to that analysis. And some of the gaps, so again, this is the really dense part of the program, but it is chock full of good information. So what they found, right, was that there's significant time changes. So it takes 10 years for a national standard to take effect in the Florida Building Code. And yet, so that's Florida, right? The state building code. So when the national sort of standards teams start, let's say they start in 2019, they're looking at technologies that are a few years old already. So like by the time they've gone through their rigorous review of the material, it is already 10 years by the time it comes to the state of Florida. The challenge that we found is there's infrequent updates from that to even our local or project specifications. So some of the specs that we found locally are 20 years old. Mind you, these specifications are updated every 3 to 5 years. And what we found is that there's no process to comprehensively update our local codes and standards. We also found discrepancies between the specifications that require special attributes, but then it doesn't expand the range. So, for example, some projects are specifying reduce emissions of materials, but then they require the use of conventional materials. So there would be no way to meet those emission requirements, right? So it kind of leads to there's no one bidding on that project. And again, I think it's just, we think, we know, it's inadvertent, right? But without that sort of comprehensive ability to review and update these codes and standards, it's an issue. We also um, found that people use prescriptive specifications instead of performance-based ones, right? So specifying the materials and the products instead of saying it should be at, X PSI and last blah years, things like that. And then even when the local team or any project specifier, so it could be a private project, Amazon is building a ton of data warehouses and so they're going to specify their materials. We do find that when they even want to use new materials, there is a lack of data to support those changes, right? So because there's this requirement if they want long-term exposure of the product or field service records, it does limit the introduction of those materials and it's a huge burden for startups. They don't have 5 years worth of data, 10 years worth of data, right? And then finally, and again, this is just the top six. There's probably like 10, but I was trying to summarize it for you. But there is a lack of coordination between municipalities and departments. So every department sort of has their own specifications, yet it is very similar to the requirements in other departments, other municipalities, certainly in Broward, Palm Beach, Monroe, it's sort of the same thing, but it's different for every department in every county. And so that means that if you are a company trying to deploy projects up in Broward, you have to really adhere to a whole different set of specs than you would in Miami-Dade County, even though we're trying to achieve the same thing. So that lack of coordination does create a barrier for companies. So there are recommendations to address some of these gaps, right? And so um, one of the things that we should do is specification writers can reference the latest version of standards, right? Establish this regular cadence. And we know it is easier said than done. The Please don't make the wrong assumption that we think this is easy. We actually think this is really hard. This might be the hardest part of our work. And so we're saying in a perfect world, this is what we would love. Establishing regular cadence, having employees that lead code and specification updates as part of their job descriptions. Again, easier said than done. We know we don't control that. We know that the counties, municipalities, the cities, they are inundated. So it's not a small ask. And the second one is to use performance-based specifications, right? So talking about strength and durability versus material types. Um, we also think that for materials that do not have a long um, data analysis record to present, but we don't want to preclude ourselves from using it. Is there are some national testing specifications that exist, so we can follow those procedures to evaluate those materials. Um, we would love, one of the things that we'd love to do, and this would take a lot of money, is to establish test beds for product demonstrations and the approval process, right, all the way through. What's it going to take? um, and to coordinate amongst ourselves, at least in this region, so that we're not duplicating identical tests, right? So that we don't have to do the same test in Palm Beach County that we just conducted in Monroe. So that would go a long way towards shortening that timeline. And then we would create, publicize, implement processes, right? So establish clear metrics for priorities. So when we are specifying a job, not we, you, when you all are specifying your projects, just have clear metrics for what do you want to emphasize. Is it emission reduction? Is it circularity? Is it resilience? And then we'll use the standard methodologies to evaluate that special performance. Again, QR code has been sitting up there. It is on our website. It's probably Googleable, but and we can also send it to you. So, with all that said on policy, I've told you how hard it is. We are establishing a working group. We're looking for system connectors, right? Someone who can operate between policy, the infrastructure implementation, they have experience in codes and standards, or procurement, contracting. Sometimes in the procurement specs, they actually specify what type of materials, which then conflicts with the sort of resilience or emission needs of the actual project. So someone that does that, you have insight into how to get things changed. We know it's not easy. So what would it take? How do we grow the awareness of where the policies break down between practice, right? How does that hinder? And then having the ability to assess what's feasible, what's scalable, what can we implement? We're thinking, this is the longest persona. It's like, we know you're out there. You don't have to fit all of it, but some of it just gives you an idea, right? So you're likely to influence code adoption, material systems approval. Um, and really for us, it's about, we know that a lot of policymakers and specifiers and people who work in the munis and the cities and the counties, building departments, etc., they're also sometimes frustrated, right? So they want to make sure that we're also reducing risk while we're enabling the progress, right? We want to deliver the projects responsibly, effectively, but they want to ensure that the policies are practical, not just theoretical. So these are the types of folks we want on this committee. We have a nice set of names already that we were given, but we would implore you all to just send an email to Kaisha, Moody at FIU.edu, to send us more names or give us your thoughts. So with that, do you have any questions? So here are the QR codes. So the QR codes goes to our website. The other one is to just sign up for our announcements. So when our mid-May applications go out, we will, if you're signed up, we will be sending you an email letting you know it's happening. That was so much information. I never talk this long, so I am going to stop talking. So Prannoy, it's over to you.